I straightened my blazer one last time before stepping into the glass-walled conference room of Vertex Technologies, the company that had been my professional home for the past 4 years. The quarterly leadership meeting was about to begin. And as senior project manager, I was prepared to present the results of my team's latest software development initiative, a project I'd personally led to completion 3 weeks ahead of schedule and 12% under budget. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The conference room hummed with pre-meeting chatter, executives arranging themselves around the sleek mahogany table like chess pieces taking position. Richard Barnes, the CEO, sat at the head, scrolling through his phone with a furrowed brow. His right-hand man, Greg Peterson, occupied the seat beside him, both men in nearly identical charcoal suits that seemed to be the unofficial uniform of Vertex's upper management. I took my assigned seat, placed my laptop and portfolio on the table, and nodded greetings to my colleagues. Despite my title and proven track record, I was always conscious of being one of only 2 women in these leadership meetings. The other, Linda from HR, caught my eye from across the table and gave me an encouraging smile. "Let's get started," Richard announced, his voice instantly silencing the room. "We've got a packed agenda today, starting with the Carson Medical acquisition update." "Greg!" Greg stood, straightening his tie with a practiced motion. "The Carson deal is proceeding as planned. We expect to finalize within the month, which positions us perfectly for the MedTech conference in Phoenix." Richard nodded approvingly. As Greg continued outlining the acquisition strategy, the room's attention fixed on his presentation. I discreetly reviewed my own notes, adding a few last-minute points about my team's performance metrics, confident that our achievements would speak for themselves when my turn came. An hour into the meeting, after detailed discussions about market expansion and competitive analysis, Richard finally turned to me. "Emma, you're up. The Parker Project update." I stood, connecting my laptop to the room's display system. "Thank you, Richard. I'm pleased to report that the Parker Project has exceeded expectations on all fronts." My presentation was meticulously prepared, clean, data-driven slides outlining how my team had not only delivered the client's custom enterprise software ahead of schedule, but had also implemented additional security features that the client hadn't initially requested but had enthusiastically embraced. The early delivery allowed Parker Industries to begin their digital transformation process ahead of schedule, I explained, highlighting a chart showing projected productivity increases. Additionally, our team's innovative approach to their security protocols has already been highlighted by Parker's CTO as a key differentiator from their competitors. As I spoke, I noticed Richard and Greg exchanging glances and whispers, barely paying attention to the results I was presenting. My confidence wavered momentarily, but I continued, moving to the client satisfaction metrics that showed unanimous approval from Parker's leadership team. In summary, I concluded, the Parker Project represents one of our most successful implementations to date, with potential for significant expanded services in the next fiscal year. They're already discussing having us develop their mobile platform, which would represent approximately $3 million in additional revenue. I expected at least a perfunctory acknowledgement of these results, perhaps even the standard good work that Richard typically offered after successful project presentations. Instead, he merely nodded and said, "Thanks, Emma. Brian, you're next with the quarterly finance update." The abrupt dismissal caught me off guard. I returned to my seat, a knot forming in my stomach as Brian took over the presentation screen. Throughout Brian's detailed breakdown of our quarterly finances, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, especially given the continued sidelong glances between Richard and Greg. The meeting concluded 2 hours later with Richard's usual rallying speech about market domination and exceptional performance. As everyone began gathering their materials, Richard called out, "Emma, Greg, can you both stay behind for a moment?" The conference room emptied quickly, leaving me with the 2 men. Richard remained seated at the head of the table, while Greg stood with his arms crossed, leaning against the glass wall. "Emma," Richard began, his tone oddly formal, "we need to discuss your role here at Vertex." The knot in my stomach tightened. "Of course. Is there a concern about the Parker project?" "No, the project itself met specifications," Richard replied, dismissively. "This is about Vertex's strategic direction and leadership needs." Greg stepped forward. "We're restructuring the project management division. In light of our upcoming expansion, particularly with the Carson acquisition, we need to ensure our leadership team is appropriately aligned." "I'm not sure I understand," I said, though a sinking feeling suggested I understood all too well. Richard cleared his throat. "Emma, you've done solid work here, but we need someone who can bring a certain presence to client relations as we move into more competitive territory. Someone who can go beyond technical delivery to really represent Vertex's brand in the industry. My client satisfaction scores are the highest in the division," I pointed out, struggling to keep my voice level. "Parker specifically requested me for their upcoming projects." "It's not about metrics," Greg interjected. "It's about fit, the executive presence required for where we're heading." His eyes flicked to Richard, who nodded slightly. "We've decided to bring in someone with a different profile for your position," Richard said. "A leadership style better suited to our growth trajectory." The implication hung in the air, unspoken but unmistakable. "You're replacing me," I stated flatly. "May I ask why, given my performance record and client relationships?" Richard shifted uncomfortably, but maintained eye contact. "This isn't a reflection on your technical capabilities, Emma. But leadership at this level requires a certain authority, particularly with the kinds of clients we're targeting: manufacturing, finance, tech. They respond to strong, commanding leadership. And you don't believe I provide that?" I kept my hands folded calmly on the table, though they trembled slightly. Greg stepped in, his tone condescending. "Emma, be realistic. When we're in rooms with CEOs from traditional industries, they expect a certain type of representative, someone they relate to, someone who speaks their language." "Someone male," I said, the words escaping before I could filter them. Richard's expression hardened. "That's a simplistic interpretation. This is about comprehensive leadership qualities, not gender." But his avoidance of direct eye contact told me everything I needed to know. "When does this transition take place?" I asked, my mind already racing through options, calculations, ramifications. "We've brought someone on board." "Already," Richard replied. "Jason Myers from Delphi Systems. He'll be taking over your projects effective immediately." The shock must have registered on my face because Greg quickly added, "We're prepared to offer a generous severance package, of course, 3-month salary and benefits continuation." They'd already hired my replacement. They'd made this decision well before today's meeting, perhaps even while I was successfully completing the Parker project. "I see," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And what happens with my team and ongoing projects? "Jason will manage the transition," Richard said, pushing a folder across the table. "All the details are in here, including your severance terms and exit procedures. HR will assist with the handover process." I didn't touch the folder. "And Parker Industries? They specifically requested me for their mobile development project." Greg waved his hand dismissively. "We'll handle Parker. Jason has extensive experience in similar implementations. I'm sure they'll be satisfied with the transition." I stood slowly, gathering my laptop and materials with deliberate care, buying myself time to process what was happening. "When is my last day?" "Today," Richard said, not quite meeting my eyes. For continuity purposes, we think it's best to make a clean break. Linda will help you gather your personal items. Your access will be deactivated at 5 o'clock. The coldness of it, 4 years of dedication ended in a 15-minute conversation, struck me like a physical blow. But I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. "I understand," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll need to speak with my team before I go." "That won't be necessary," Greg cut in. "We'll address the team this afternoon. It's less disruptive that way." Not even allowed to say goodbye to the people I'd led and mentored. The final indignity. Richard stood, extending his hand as if we'd just concluded a routine business meeting. "We appreciate your contributions to Vertex, Emma. I'm sure you'll land on your feet." I looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment before shaking it briefly. "I certainly will." With that, I walked out of the conference room, past curious eyes and whispered conversations, to my office where Linda was already waiting, a cardboard box in her hands and genuine sympathy in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Emma," she said quietly, closing the door behind us. "This isn't right." "No," I agreed, setting down my laptop and turning to face the space I'd occupied for 4 years. "It certainly isn't. Linda helped me pack my personal items, the awards I'd earned, family photos, the small plant my team had given me after our first successful major project. As we worked, she spoke in hushed tones. "It's been happening across departments," she confided. "3 other women in leadership positions have been replaced in the last 6 months. Always the same explanation: strategic restructuring or alignment with company direction. I've tried to raise concerns, but HR doesn't make these decisions," I finished for her. She nodded, her expression troubled. "Listen, Emma, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but the rumor is they're pitching for Meridian Global's business. Richard and Greg have been obsessed with landing them as a client." Meridian Global, one of the largest financial services firms in the country, known for their traditional, old-school corporate culture. Suddenly, the timing made more sense. "Thanks for telling me, Linda," I said, placing the last of my items in the box. "And thank you for your help." "What will you do now?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. I paused, looking out the window at the city skyline. "I'm not entirely sure yet, but Vertex hasn't heard the last from me." By 5 o'clock, I was sitting in my car in the company parking garage, the box of my professional life beside me on the passenger seat. I hadn't cried. Not yet. The shock and adrenaline were still carrying me, along with a steadily growing anger that burned beneath the surface. I started the engine but didn't immediately drive away. Instead, I pulled out my phone and made a call to the one person I knew would understand exactly what I was experiencing. "Rebecca, it's Emma. Do you have time for a drink? I've just been fired." Rebecca Taylor had been my mentor when I first entered the tech industry. Now the founder of her own consulting firm, she'd navigated the same treacherous waters I found myself drowning in. "O'Malley's, 30 minutes. First round's on me," she said without hesitation. O'Malley's was quiet for a Thursday evening. The after-work crowd not yet arrived in full force. Rebecca was already at a corner booth, 2 glasses of whiskey waiting on the table. At 55, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had battled her way through decades in male-dominated industries and emerged victorious, if somewhat scarred. "Tell me everything," she said as I slid into the booth. I recounted the meeting, the dismissal, the thinly veiled explanations, and watched as Rebecca's expression shifted from concern to anger to calculated determination. "Classic playbook," she said when I finished. "They want Meridian's business, and they don't think a woman can close the deal with those dinosaurs." She took a sip of her whiskey. "What's your game plan?" "I don't have one yet," I admitted. "It's all still sinking in." "Then let's make one," she said, pulling a notebook from her bag. "First question, do you want to fight this legally? It's gender discrimination. Plain and simple. I considered the option, picturing the lengthy legal battle, the whispered reputation of being a troublemaker in the industry, the strain it would place on my financial resources. I don't think so, I finally said. Not because they don't deserve it, but because it wouldn't actually solve anything. Even if I won, the culture wouldn't change, and I'd be labeled difficult. Rebecca nodded, unsurprised. Fair assessment. So what do you want, Emma? Really want? The question hung between us as I swirled the amber liquid in my glass. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? My job back? None of those felt quite right. I want to prove them wrong, I said finally. I want to succeed so dramatically that they regret their decision every day. A slow smile spread across Rebecca's face. Now that's an objective I can get behind. So, proving them wrong. Let's break that down into actionable steps. For the next 2 hours, Rebecca and I strategized. We listed my strengths, my industry connections, possible career paths. As the evening progressed, an idea began to take shape. Not just a rebound job, but a complete redirection of my professional trajectory. You've always talked about wanting to start your own firm someday, Rebecca pointed out. Maybe this is the universe giving you a not-so-gentle push in that direction. With what capital? I asked, the practical considerations dampening my enthusiasm. I have savings, but not enough to launch and sustain a competitive tech consultancy. Rebecca leaned forward. Remember Tom Wilson? Your former client? The venture capitalist? The same. He's been looking to invest in women-led tech ventures. Says the returns are better and he's tired of funding bros with apps. His words, not mine. She tapped her notebook thoughtfully. He respects my opinion. If I brought him a solid business plan from you, he'd at least take the meeting. Hope flickered. The first I'd felt since walking into that conference room this morning. You'd do that? In a heartbeat, but Emma, she fixed me with a serious look. You've got to be all in. This won't be like working at Vertex. It'll be harder, longer hours, more pressure. Every decision, every success, every failure, it all comes back to you. I understand, I said, and I did. The prospect was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Then let's do this right, Rebecca said, raising her glass. To the death of Emma Parker, Senior Project Manager at Vertex Technologies, and the birth of whatever comes next. I clinked my glass against hers. Whatever comes next. By the time I arrived home that night, the shock had worn off, replaced by a strange mix of fear and determination. My apartment felt different somehow, less like a place I returned to after working for someone else, and more like a temporary command center for whatever I was about to build. I placed the box from my office on the kitchen counter and started to unpack it, but stopped halfway through. Instead, I moved to my desk, opened my laptop, and began to type. Not a resume or job application, but the skeleton of a business plan. For years, I'd noticed a gap in the market. Tech implementation services that actually understood and prioritized the human users of the systems. So many firms, including Vertex, focused on the technical aspects while treating user experience and adoption as afterthoughts. The result was technically sound systems that people hated using, leading to poor adoption rates and frustrated clients. My approach had always been different, integrated. It was why the Parker project had been so successful. I'd insisted on incorporating user feedback throughout the development process, resulting in a system that Parker's employees actually wanted to use. As I typed, the concept took clearer shape. A technology consultancy focused on human-centered implementation, bringing together technical expertise with deep understanding of organizational behavior and change management. Not just installing systems, but ensuring they improved people's work lives. By 3 a.m, I had the bones of a business plan, a potential name, Prism Technologies, and a growing list of industry contacts who might be interested in my approach. I finally went to bed, my mind still racing with possibilities. The next week passed in a blur of activity. I refined my business plan with Rebecca's input, prepared a pitch deck, and scheduled a meeting with Tom Wilson. I reached out to former colleagues and clients who I trusted, testing my concept and gathering feedback. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with several people expressing interest in either working with my new venture or becoming potential clients. 9 days after being escorted from Vertex's offices, I sat across from Tom Wilson in his minimalist downtown office, pitching my vision for Prism Technologies. "The problem isn't new," I explained, advancing to a slide showing adoption statistics for enterprise software implementations. Only 29% of major technology implementations are considered successful by the organizations that commission them. The technical failures get all the attention, but the real issue is human adoption. Tom nodded, his expression thoughtful as I continued. "Prism would bridge that gap," I said, passion evident in my voice. "We don't just deliver technology that works, we deliver technology that works for people. Our integrated approach brings together technical expertise with organizational psychology and change management." When I finished my presentation, Tom was silent for a long moment, reviewing the financials and market analysis I'd provided. "You were at Vertex, correct?" he finally asked. I nodded, unsure where he was going with the question. "I've heard things about their culture," he said carefully. "Not particularly progressive." "That's a diplomatic way of putting it," I replied with a wry smile. "I was recently let go to make way for someone with stronger leadership presence, in advance of their pitch to Meridian Global." Tom's eyebrows rose. "Meridian? Interesting." He made a note on his tablet. "Emma, your concept is solid. Your financials are reasonable if perhaps a bit conservative, and I appreciate your direct approach. I've funded ventures with less promise." Hope surged within me. "Does that mean you're interested?" "It means I'm intrigued," he clarified. "But venture funding isn't just about the business concept. It's about the founder. Do you have what it takes to build this from nothing? To make the hard decisions? To stand your ground when everyone tells you you're wrong?" I met his gaze squarely. A week ago, I was fired from a job I excelled at because I don't fit someone's idea of what leadership looks like. I could have crumbled. I could have played it safe and looked for another corporate position. Instead, I'm sitting here, pitching you a company that will challenge the status quo of an entire industry. I leaned forward slightly. "I don't just have what it takes, Mr. Wilson. I've been preparing for this my entire career." A slow smile spread across his face. "Call me Tom, and I think we have the foundation for a partnership here." 2 weeks later, with an initial funding commitment from Tom's firm and additional investment from Rebecca, who insisted on being part of what she called the sweetest revenge plan I've ever seen, Prism Technologies officially existed. I leased a small office space in a converted warehouse downtown, nothing like Vertex's gleaming glass tower, but vibrant with possibility. My first hire was Nadia Chen, a brilliant systems architect who'd been passed over for promotion 3 times at her previous firm, despite outperforming her male colleagues. My second was Marcus Washington, a UI/UX designer whose innovative approaches had been repeatedly sidelined at a major tech company in favor of safer, more conventional designs. Together, we began building something different, not just in the services we offered, but in how we operated as a company. Flexible hours, remote work options, transparent salary structures, and decision-making processes that valued diverse perspectives. The culture at Prism became as much a selling point as our technical expertise. Our first clients were small to mid-sized companies referred through my and Rebecca's networks. Each successful implementation led to more referrals, and within 6 months, we had grown to a team of 12 with a client list that was beginning to raise eyebrows in the industry. Then came the call that changed everything. I was reviewing a client proposal when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Emma Parker, Prism Technologies," I answered. "Ms. Parker, this is William Chen, CIO of Parker Industries," said a voice I recognized from my Vertex days. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all, Mr. Chen. It's good to hear from you. How can I help?" There was a pause before he continued. "I'll be direct, Ms. Parker. We've been disappointed with the direction of our mobile development project with Vertex. The implementation is behind schedule, over budget, and frankly, the approach doesn't align with our needs." I kept my tone professional, betraying none of the vindication I felt. "I'm sorry to hear that." "The thing is," he continued, "when we initially contracted with Vertex, we were under the impression you would be leading the project. Your replacement has been, let's say, less attentive to our specific requirements." "I see," I said carefully. "We're considering our options," Mr. Chen said, "including possibly terminating our contract with Vertex and exploring alternatives. Given our positive experience with you previously, I wondered if Prism might be positioned to take on such a project." The opportunity was immense, not just the project itself, but what it represented. Parker Industries was one of Vertex's showcase clients, frequently referenced in their marketing materials. Losing them would be a significant blow, both financially and reputationally. "We would certainly be interested in discussing how Prism could meet your needs," I replied, keeping my voice measured despite my racing heart. "Perhaps we could schedule a meeting to review your requirements in detail?" "Excellent." Mr. Chen sounded relieved. "There's one other matter. We've been in discussions with Meridian Global about a potential strategic partnership. They're in need of a technology implementation partner as well, and have asked for our recommendation. If our experience with Prism proves positive, we would be inclined to recommend your firm." Meridian Global, the very client Vertex had pushed me aside to pursue. The irony was almost too perfect. "We would welcome the opportunity to demonstrate our capabilities to both Parker Industries and potentially Meridian Global," I said, my mind already racing with possibilities. After setting up a meeting for the following week, I sat back in my chair, a complex mixture of emotions washing over me. This wasn't just a potential contract. It was validation. It was the market itself rejecting the outdated thinking that had cost me my job. That evening, I called an impromptu team meeting to share the news and begin preparations for the Parker presentation. As we worked late into the night, strategizing our approach and refining our proposal, I felt a surge of gratitude for the path that had led me here, even the painful parts. "Something amusing?" Marcus asked, noticing my smile as we reviewed the presentation slides. "Just thinking about how being fired turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me," I replied. Nadia looked up from her laptop. "Their loss, our gain, and potentially Parker's and Meridian's gain too." "Speaking of Meridian," Marcus said, "do you realize what would happen if we landed both these clients? We'd be directly competing with Vertex in their target market. With their former client and the client they pushed Emma aside to pursue," Nadia added with a grin. "That's not just success. That's poetic justice." I shook my head, though I couldn't suppress my smile. This isn't about revenge. It's about building something better. A company that succeeds because it values the right things, not despite valuing them. But as we returned to our work, I couldn't deny the small, satisfied part of me that pictured Richard and Greg's faces when they realized what was happening. Sometimes living well truly is the best revenge. The Parker presentation was scheduled for the following Tuesday, giving us a week to prepare a comprehensive proposal that would showcase not just our technical capabilities, but our fundamentally different approach to technology implementation. I knew from my previous work with them that Parker Industries valued innovation and employee satisfaction equally, a perfect match for Prism's philosophy. The night before the presentation, I stood in front of my closet, considering my options with more care than usual. Tomorrow wasn't just another client meeting. It was a pivotal moment for Prism and for me personally. I finally selected a cobalt blue suit, professional but distinctive, unlike the muted grays and navies that dominated Vertex's leadership meetings. As I laid out my clothes, my phone chimed with an incoming email. The sender's name made my heart skip. Linda from Vertex's HR department. Emma, the message began. I hope this finds you well. I've heard rumors about your new venture and wanted to reach out. Things at Vertex have become increasingly problematic. Jason isn't working out with the Parker account. They've been asking about you, and morale is suffering across departments. Several team members have asked about opportunities at Prism. Would you be open to discussing over coffee? No official capacity, just as friends. Linda. I sat on the edge of my bed, rereading the message. It confirmed what I'd suspected, that Vertex's decision had backfired, at least with Parker Industries. And the fact that my former team members were inquiring about Prism was both flattering and vindicating. I replied, suggesting coffee later, in the week after the Parker presentation. Then I set my phone aside and focused on reviewing my notes one final time before getting some rest. Tomorrow would be a defining day, and I needed to be at my best. The Parker Industries headquarters occupied a renovated industrial building on the outskirts of the city, its brick exterior contrasting with the cutting-edge technology developed within. I arrived with Nadia and Marcus 30 minutes early, using the time to set up in the conference room and center ourselves before the presentation. Nervous? Nadia asked as I adjusted the display settings for our presentation. Focused, I corrected with a smile. This feels right in a way that's hard to explain. At precisely 10 o'clock, William Chen entered the conference room accompanied by Parker's executive team, including the CEO, Sarah Parker herself, a rarity for initial vendor presentations. Ms. Parker, William began, allow me to introduce Emma Parker of Prism Technologies. No relation, I assume. None that I'm aware of, I replied with a smile, shaking his hand and then Sarah's. Though I'd be honored by the connection. Thank you all for considering Prism for this project. Sarah Parker studied me with interest. William speaks highly of your previous work with us. I was disappointed when you didn't continue with our mobile initiative. As was I said diplomatically, but that circumstance led to the creation of Prism, so perhaps it was ultimately for the best. We'll see, she replied with a hint of a smile. Show us what makes Prism different. For the next hour, my team and I presented our vision for Parker's mobile platform, not just the technical specifications, but our human-centered development approach, our project management, methodology that emphasized continuous user feedback, and our post-implementation support structure designed to maximize adoption. Throughout the presentation, I noticed Sarah Parker watching me as much as the slides, her expression thoughtful. When we concluded, she was the first to speak. Impressive, she said simply. You've addressed concerns we didn't even know how to articulate yet. What's your timeline for implementation? The question was a good sign. Executives didn't ask about timelines unless they were seriously considering proceeding. We've developed a phased approach, I explained, bringing up our proposed timeline. This allows for user testing and adjustment at critical junctures while still delivering the complete platform within your desired 6-month window. William Chen nodded approvingly. This aligns much better with our internal processes than the monolithic approach Vertex has been pushing. The meeting extended well beyond its scheduled time as Parker's team engaged deeply with our proposals, asking insightful questions that allowed us to showcase both our technical expertise and our philosophical approach. By the time we concluded, the energy in the room was unmistakably positive. Thank you for a refreshing presentation, Sarah Parker said as we prepared to leave. We'll be in touch very soon. As we packed up our materials, William Chen lingered behind his colleagues. "Between us," he said quietly, "this is exactly what we've been looking for. And I've already mentioned your name to my counterpart at Meridian. Expect a call." The three of us maintained our professional composure until we were in the elevator, then broke into grins as the doors closed. "They're going to sign with us," Marcus said confidently. "Did you see their technical lead's face when you explained our integration approach?" He was practically salivating. "Let's not count our clients before they're signed," I cautioned, though I shared his optimism. "But yes, I think it went well." "Well?" Nadia laughed. "Emma, it went brilliantly. And did you hear what Chen said about Meridian? This could be huge for us." As we exited the building, my phone rang. An unknown number with a local area code. "Emma Parker," I answered. "Ms. Parker, this is James Wilson, CEO of Meridian Global," said a deep voice. "William Chen of Parker Industries suggested I contact you regarding a potential technology partnership. Do you have time this week to discuss?" I caught my team's eyes, giving them a thumbs up. "I would be delighted to meet Mr. Wilson. How does Thursday morning work for your schedule?" We set the appointment, and as I ended the call, I couldn't help but think about how dramatically my professional life had changed in just a few short months. From being escorted out of Vertex's offices to potentially securing 2 major clients who represented exactly the kind of work I was passionate about. "Let's celebrate," Marcus suggested. "Just a quick lunch. We've earned it." We chose a small bistro near Parker's headquarters, toasting our successful presentation with sparkling water and sharing ideas for the Meridian meeting. Halfway through our meal, my phone chimed with an email notification from Sarah Parker herself. "Prism team," it read. "No need to prolong the suspense. We'd like to proceed with your proposal for our mobile platform development. William will be in touch with details, but I wanted to personally confirm our decision. Your presentation today represented exactly the approach we've been seeking. Looking forward to a productive partnership. Sarah Parker, CEO, Parker Industries." I read the email aloud to my team, hardly believing the speed of the decision. Client commitments like this typically took weeks of deliberation, not hours. "They must have been really unhappy with Vertex," Nadia observed. "Or really impressed with us," Marcus countered. "Both, I think," I said, forwarding the email to our operations manager back at the office to begin preparation. Either way, this is a significant moment for Prism. What I didn't say aloud was what this meant personally. Validation that I'd been right all along. That my approach to technology implementation, the very approach that Richard and Greg had dismissed as insufficient, for commanding leadership, was exactly what sophisticated clients like Parker Industries wanted. As we finished our lunch and prepared to return to the office, I received another email that made me pause. The sender was Greg Peterson, my former colleague at Vertex. "Emma," the message read tersely, "heard rumors you're meeting with Meridian. Let's discuss. Coffee tomorrow? Greg." The audacity was almost amusing. After pushing me out to pursue Meridian themselves, they were now concerned enough about our potential relationship to reach out directly. "Anything important?" Nadia asked, noticing my expression. I showed her the email, and she let out a low whistle. "They're worried. What are you going to do?" I considered the question carefully. The petty part of me wanted to ignore Greg's message entirely, to let Vertex stew in the uncertainty of what I might be building with their coveted prospective client. But the businesswoman in me recognized an opportunity. "I think I'll have coffee with Greg," I said finally. "Information flows both ways. It might be useful to understand Vertex's current position before our meeting with Meridian." "Playing chess while they're playing checkers," Marcus said with approval. "This is why you're the boss." As we left the restaurant, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony. 3 months ago, Richard and Greg had determined I lacked the leadership presence necessary for Vertex's growth. Now I was running my own successful firm, securing the very clients they coveted, and about to meet with Greg from a position of strength rather than subordination. I hadn't planned on revenge when I founded Prism. I'd simply wanted to create something better, something that reflected my values and vision for what technology implementation could be. But as fate would have it, success was proving to be the most satisfying revenge of all. The coffee shop Greg had suggested was halfway between the Prism office and Vertex headquarters, neutral territory, though nothing about this meeting felt neutral. I arrived 15 minutes early, deliberately choosing a corner table that gave me a view of both the entrance and the street outside. A small power move, ensuring I would see Greg before he saw me. I ordered a cappuccino and opened my laptop, responding to emails about the freshly secured Parker Industries contract. Our team was already mobilizing, preparing project timelines and resource allocations. The energy at Prism was electric. Our first major client was cause enough for celebration, but the potential Meridian Global contract had elevated the mood to near euphoria. At precisely 9 a.m., Greg pushed through the door, his familiar confident stride faltering slightly as he scanned the cafe. I didn't wave or call out, simply watched as he finally spotted me in the corner. The brief flicker of uncertainty and his expression was subtle but unmistakable. "Emma," he greeted, extending his hand as he approached. "Thanks for meeting me. You're looking well." "Success agrees with me," I replied, accepting his handshake briefly before gesturing to the empty chair across from me. "Please sit." As he settled in, I noticed small details I might have missed during our years working together. The way he straightened his tie when uncomfortable, the slight tightness around his eyes that betrayed stress beneath his polished exterior. "So," I began, closing my laptop. "You wanted to talk." Greg cleared his throat. "Yes. First, let me say congratulations on your new venture. Word travels fast in our industry, and what you've built with Prism in such a short time is impressive." "Thank you," I said simply, neither accepting nor deflecting the compliment. "Though I doubt you asked me here just to congratulate me." He smiled tightly. "Direct as always. I appreciate that about you, Emma." He paused as the server delivered his coffee. "I'll be equally direct. We've heard that Parker Industries is terminating their contract with Vertex and moving their mobile development project to Prism." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "That's correct. We signed the agreement yesterday." Greg nodded slowly, as if absorbing a blow he'd been bracing for. "And Meridian Global? William Chen mentioned he'd made an introduction." "I have a meeting with their CEO tomorrow morning," I confirmed, seeing no reason to hide information that was likely already circulating in industry channels. Greg leaned forward, lowering his voice slightly. "That's actually why I wanted to speak with you. Meridian is important to Vertex's growth strategy. Richard has been pursuing them for months." "I'm aware," I replied, the unspoken context hanging between us, that I had been fired specifically to make way for what Vertex considered a more suitable representative to court Meridian's business. "Look, Emma," Greg continued, "business is business, and I understand there's no reason for you to do Vertex any favors. But I thought perhaps we could discuss an arrangement that might benefit both our companies." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening. A partnership of sorts. Vertex has established relationships with several major financial institutions that could be valuable to a growing firm like Prism. We could introduce you, provide co-marketing opportunities in exchange for stepping aside. With Meridian," I finished for him. Greg had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "Not stepping aside exactly. More like focusing on different aspects of their business needs. There's plenty of work to go around." I took a sip of my cappuccino, using the moment to gather my thoughts. The proposal was almost laughable. After pushing me out, they now wanted to negotiate, to carve up potential client relationships as if they were territory to be divided between competing powers. "That's an interesting proposition," I said finally. "But I'm curious, does Richard know you're here making this offer?" Greg shifted in his seat. "Richard trusts my judgment on strategic partnerships." "So that's a no," I concluded. "You're here on your own initiative, trying to mitigate a situation that's rapidly spinning beyond Vertex's control." His expression hardened slightly. "I'm trying to find a practical solution that works for everyone. Business isn't personal. Emma, you know that." "Actually, Greg, business is deeply personal," I countered. "It's built on relationships, trust, and values, all very personal things. When Vertex decided I wasn't the right type of leader to represent the company with clients like Meridian, that was personal too." "That's not fair," he protested. "The restructuring was about organizational alignment, not—" "Please," I interrupted, my tone sharpening. "Let's not insult each other's intelligence. I was told explicitly that clients like Meridian expected a certain type of representative. Someone with commanding presence and executive authority, all thinly veiled code for male." Greg fell silent, unable to counter the truth we both knew. "I appreciate your visit," I continued, softening my tone slightly. "But Prism will be meeting with Meridian tomorrow as planned. We'll present our approach, our values, and our track record honestly. If they choose to work with us, it will be because they believe we're the right partner for their needs, not because of backroom arrangements." "You're making a mistake," Greg said, frustration evident in his voice. "Vertex can make things difficult for a new firm in this space. Richard has connections throughout the industry." The implied threat hung in the air between us. I leaned forward, meeting his gaze directly. "Are you threatening me, Greg? Because that would be both unprofessional and unnecessary. Prism isn't competing with Vertex on every front. We're building something different, focusing on areas where we excel. If Meridian chooses us, it will be because our approach aligns better with their needs, not because we played politics." Greg seemed to realize his misstep. "Not threatening," he backpedaled. "Just being realistic about the competitive landscape." "I appreciate the reality check," I replied, gathering my things. "But Prism will navigate that landscape on our own terms. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a company to run and a presentation to prepare." As I stood to leave, Greg remained seated, looking somewhat deflated. "Emma," he said, his voice quieter than before. "For what it's worth, I argued against letting you go. Richard was adamant, but I thought it was a mistake." I paused, studying him for signs of manipulation or insincerity, but found none. "Thank you for telling me that," I said finally. "Though it doesn't change where we are now." I shouldered my bag and added, "Good luck with your growth strategy, Greg. I mean that sincerely." Walking out of the coffee shop, I felt an unexpected lightness. The conversation with Greg had clarified something important. Vertex was worried, perhaps even panicking about Prism's rapid ascent and the potential loss of Meridian's business. Their concern validated our approach in a way that even the Parker contract hadn't. Back at the Prism office, I found Marcus and Nadia huddled around a whiteboard, mapping out our approach for the Meridian meeting. "How was coffee with the enemy?" Marcus asked, only half joking. "Illuminating," I replied, setting down my things. Vertex is concerned enough about our meeting with Meridian that Greg tried to propose a partnership where we'd essentially agree to step aside. Nadia's eyebrows shot up. "Seriously? That's practically an admission that they see us as a legitimate threat." "Exactly," I agreed. "Which means our approach is resonating in the market. Speaking of which, how are we coming with the Meridian presentation?" For the next several hours, we refined our strategy, deeply researching Meridian's business model, current technological infrastructure, and stated growth objectives. Unlike Vertex's one-size-fits-all approach, We tailored every aspect of our proposal to Meridian's specific needs and organizational culture. By evening, we had a presentation that not only showcased our technical capabilities, but also articulated a vision for how technology could enable Meridian's business strategy rather than simply existing alongside it. It was the kind of integrated thinking I'd always tried to bring to my projects at Vertex, often against resistance from leadership who saw technology implementation as primarily a technical challenge rather than an organizational one. As the team dispersed for the night, my phone rang. Sarah Parker, CEO of Parker Industries. "Emma," she greeted warmly. "Hope I'm not catching you too late." "Not at all," I assured her. "We're just wrapping up preparations for a meeting tomorrow. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to give you a heads up. I received a rather aggressive call from Richard Barnes this afternoon after our contract termination notice reached Vertex. He implied that your departure from Vertex might have included improper solicitation of their clients." My stomach tightened. "That's completely unfounded. I know," Sarah interrupted calmly. "I told him as much. We sought you out based on your previous excellent work with us, not the other way around. But I thought you should be aware they're making noise." "I appreciate the warning," I said, mind racing through potential implications. "Did he mention anything specific about legal action?" "No, it seemed more like posturing," Sarah replied. "But Richard has always been more about intimidation than substance. I suspect he's trying to rattle you before your meeting with Meridian." "How did he know about that?" I wondered aloud. "It's a small industry," Sarah reminded me. "And William makes no secret of his admiration for your work. I wouldn't worry too much, but perhaps have your legal counsel review your employment agreement with Vertex, just in case." After thanking Sarah and ending the call, I immediately contacted Rebecca, who had not only invested in Prism, but had also connected me with our legal counsel. Non-competes are notoriously difficult to enforce in this state, Rebecca assured me after hearing about Richard's threats. "And since Parker approached you, not the other way around, there's little ground for a solicitation claim. This sounds like intimidation tactics, pure and simple." "That's what I thought," I agreed. "But the timing concerns me. The Meridian meeting is crucial for Prism's growth trajectory." "And Richard knows it," Rebecca said, "which is precisely why he's trying to throw you off balance. Don't let him succeed. Focus on what Prism offers that Vertex doesn't. A human-centered approach to technology that treats people as more than an afterthought." Her advice, as always, cut to the heart of the matter. I spent another hour reviewing my presentation, notes before finally heading home, determined not to let Richard's intimidation tactics distract me from what mattered. Morning arrived with a mix of anticipation and determination. I dressed with care, a charcoal gray suit that projected confidence without ostentation, paired with a vibrant emerald blouse that added a distinctive touch. Professional, polished, but unmistakably my own style, rather than a corporate uniform. The Prism team gathered for a final review before heading to Meridian's downtown headquarters. Nadia, Marcus, and I had worked together seamlessly to prepare, each bringing distinct expertise to the presentation. "Remember," I told them as we gathered our materials, "we're not here to compete with Vertex on their terms. We're offering something fundamentally different. Technology implementation that puts human experience at the center, not the periphery." "Speaking of Vertex," Marcus said, checking his phone, "you should know they're here. Just spotted Richard and Greg entering the building with their team." The news wasn't entirely unexpected, but confirmed the stakes of today's meeting. Meridian was clearly considering multiple vendors, conducting parallel presentations to compare approaches. "Good," I said firmly. "Direct comparison will only highlight the differences in our philosophies. Let's go show them what technology implementation can be when it's designed for people, not despite them." Meridian Global occupied several floors of a prestigious downtown office tower, their reception area a testament to the financial firm's traditional values: dark wood, leather furniture, and dignified artwork creating an atmosphere of established success rather than cutting-edge innovation. We were escorted to a waiting area outside the main conference room, where James Wilson, Meridian's CEO, would be meeting with potential technology partners throughout the day. As we arranged our presentation materials, the conference room door opened and Richard Barnes emerged, followed by Greg and their team. The moment was unavoidable. Richard stopped short when he saw me, his expression cycling rapidly through surprise, anger, and finally a forced professional neutrality. "Emma," he acknowledged stiffly. "I wasn't aware Prism was presenting today." "Richard, Greg," I greeted them both with a calm nod. "Best of luck with your proposal." The brief exchange was interrupted by the appearance of James Wilson himself, a tall, distinguished man in his early 60s with a reputation for old-school business values combined with surprisingly progressive operational practices. "Ms. Parker?" He extended his hand. "Thank you for coming. I've heard intriguing things about your approach from William Chen." "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Wilson," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. "We're excited to share our vision for how technology can advance Meridian's objectives." I was acutely aware of Richard and Greg watching this exchange, undoubtedly noting the warmth of Wilson's greeting compared to their own more formal reception. "We'll be interested to hear it," Wilson said, then turned to include Richard and Greg in his remarks. "All proposals will be evaluated on their technical merit, implementation methodology, and alignment with Meridian's culture and objectives. We expect to make a decision within the week." With professional nods all around, the Vertex team departed, leaving us to enter the conference room where several Meridian executives awaited our presentation. The next 90 minutes were among the most focused and energizing of my professional life. Our team presented not just a technical solution, but a holistic vision for how technology could enhance Meridian's business while respecting their established culture and practices. We emphasized our human-centered approach, illustrating how it led to higher adoption rates, greater employee satisfaction, and ultimately better return on technology investments. Throughout the presentation, I was conscious of James Wilson's attentive presence. Unlike many CEOs who might attend only portions of vendor presentations, he remained engaged throughout, asking insightful questions that revealed both technical sophistication and deep concern for how technology changes would affect Meridian's employees and clients. When we concluded, Wilson was the first to speak. "Your approach is refreshingly different, Ms. Parker. Most vendors lead with technical specifications and leave human considerations as an afterthought." "In our experience," I replied, "the technical aspects are actually the easier part of successful implementation. It's the human elements, adoption, workflow integration, cultural alignment, that determine whether a technically sound system actually delivers value." Wilson nodded thoughtfully, a perspective that aligns with my own observations over 30 years in this business. He glanced at his team before continuing. "Before you go, I'd like a moment of your time privately, if you wouldn't mind." The request was unexpected, but not unwelcome. After my team had been escorted to a waiting area, Wilson closed the conference room door and gestured for me to take a seat. "I'll be direct, Ms. Parker," he began. "I received a rather unusual call from Richard Barnes yesterday evening, suggesting that your firm might lack the established presence necessary for a project of this scale." I maintained a neutral expression despite the familiar echo of the same language used to justify my dismissal from Vertex. "And what are your thoughts on that assessment?" Wilson's eyes crinkled slightly. "I've been in business long enough to recognize when someone is trying to eliminate competition rather than win on merit." He leaned forward slightly. "I'm more interested in your perspective. You worked at Vertex until recently. Why should Meridian choose Prism instead?" The question was an opportunity I hadn't anticipated, a chance to directly address the choice between Vertex's approach and Prism's philosophy. "Vertex is an excellent technical shop," I began carefully. They deliver systems that function as specified. What they don't prioritize is how those systems integrate with human workflows or organizational culture. I paused, choosing my next words deliberately. Mr. Wilson, technology projects don't fail because the code doesn't work. They fail because people don't use the systems, or use them reluctantly and inefficiently. Wilson nodded slowly. Go on. Prism was founded specifically to address that gap, I continued. We integrate technical expertise with deep understanding of organizational behavior and change management. We don't just ask what the system should do, we ask how people will interact with it, how it will change their daily work, and how those changes advance your business objectives. And you believe this approach produces better results? I know it does, I said confidently. Our work with Parker Industries demonstrated a 22% higher adoption rate than industry standard, with 87% of users reporting that the system actually improved their productivity rather than just adding another layer of complexity to their work. Wilson considered this for a moment. One final question, Ms. Parker. If Meridian selects Prism for this project, will you personally be involved in the implementation? Absolutely, I assured him. As CEO, I remain directly engaged in all our major client projects, particularly in the strategic alignment and change management aspects. Good, he said, rising from his chair. Because while I'm impressed with your company's philosophy, it's your personal approach that William Chen recommended so highly. He said, and I quote, Emma Parker understands that technology exists to serve people, not the other way around. As we shook hands, I felt a surge of gratitude toward William for his endorsement, mixed with a quiet satisfaction that the very qualities Richard had dismissed as insufficient for commanding leadership were precisely what had impressed. Meridian's CEO. Thank you for your time and insight, Wilson said as he walked me to the door. We'll be in touch very soon. I rejoined my team in the waiting area, maintaining a professional demeanor despite the internal elation I felt about the private conversation with Wilson. As we gathered our things to depart, Greg appeared in the hallway, apparently waiting for his turn to speak privately with the Meridian CEO. Our eyes met briefly as we passed each other, his questioning, mine giving nothing away. Whatever happened next was beyond my control. We had presented our best approach, stayed true to our values, and made our case honestly. The decision now rested with Meridian. Back at the Prism office, the team was eager for details about my private conversation with Wilson. He wanted to know why Meridian should choose us over Vertex, I explained, sharing the key points of our discussion while setting up my laptop. And he mentioned that Richard had called him specifically to suggest we lacked the established presence for a project of this scale. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. They really can't see beyond their own outdated thinking, can they? Even after losing Parker, they're still pushing the same narrative. It actually works in our favor, Nadia pointed out. The more they emphasize size and tradition, the more they highlight exactly what makes us different: agility, innovation, and human-centered design. Wilson seemed to understand the distinction, I agreed. Now we wait. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. While waiting for Meridian's decision, we focused on launching the Parker Industries project, setting up work streams and communication protocols to ensure a smooth implementation. I also met with Linda, my former HR colleague from Vertex, who confirmed that morale had plummeted after the loss of the Parker contract, with several key team members actively seeking opportunities elsewhere. Richard has been on a warpath, she confided over coffee. The board is asking questions about client retention, and he's positioning the Parker situation as an anomaly rather than a symptom of deeper issues. And the team members who've been asking about Prism? I inquired. Any specific roles or skills that would be particularly valuable? Linda smiled knowingly. Thinking of recruiting from Vertex's talent pool? Only those who share our philosophy, I clarified. Technical skills can be taught, but alignment on values is fundamental. She slipped me a folded piece of paper. These 3 would be worth talking to. All exceptional performers who've been overlooked for advancement. All frustrated with the current leadership approach. I glanced at the names. 2 women and 1 man, all with specialized skills that would complement Prism's growing team. Thank you, Linda. This is helpful. Just be careful, she warned. Richard is already paranoid about you poaching clients. If he thinks you're recruiting his top talent too. Noted, I assured her. Though individuals have the right to seek employment wherever they choose. On the 4th day after our Meridian presentation, as I was reviewing resource allocations for the Parker project, my phone rang with James Wilson's number. Ms. Parker, he greeted when I answered. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, Mr. Wilson. What can I do for you? I'm calling to inform you that after careful consideration, Meridian Global has decided to partner with Prism Technologies for our enterprise system modernization initiative. Despite having hoped for this outcome, the confirmation sent a wave of exhilaration through me. That's excellent news, Mr. Wilson. We're honored by your trust and excited about the opportunity to work with Meridian. The decision wasn't difficult, he continued. Your approach aligns with my own philosophy that technology should enhance human capability, not replace or diminish it. The board was particularly impressed with your metrics on user adoption and satisfaction from previous implementations. We'll make sure Meridian experiences the same positive results, I promised. I'm counting on it, Wilson said. My assistant will contact you to arrange a formal contract meeting next week. In the meantime, I thought you should know that Richard Barnes has requested a meeting with me tomorrow. I suspect he'll make a final attempt to change our decision. I appreciate the transparency, I said carefully. I believe in direct communication, Wilson replied, and in recognizing merit, where I find it. Your presentation stood on its own strengths, Ms. Parker. The fact that you built such an impressive organization after leaving Vertex speaks volumes about both your capabilities and character. After we ended the call, I sat at my desk for a long moment, absorbing the magnitude of what had just occurred. In less than 6 months, Prism had secured not only the Parker Industries contract, but now Meridian Global as well. Both former or prospective Vertex clients, both significant players in their respective industries. I gathered the team to share the news, watching as expressions of hope transformed into celebration when I confirmed that Meridian had selected Prism. This changes everything, Marcus said, grinning broadly. We're no longer just a promising startup. We're a legitimate contender in the market. And we did it our way, Nadia added, her voice filled with pride. Not by mimicking the established players, but by offering something genuinely different. As the team celebrated, I stepped out onto our office balcony, gazing at the city skyline. The journey from that humiliating dismissal to this moment of triumph had been intense and challenging. But it had also confirmed what I'd always believed, that my approach to technology implementation wasn't just different, but better. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Heard the news about Meridian. Vindication is the best revenge. Drink soon to celebrate? I smiled, typing back, absolutely, though this feels less like revenge and more like validation. And it was true. While there was undeniable satisfaction in knowing that Richard's decision to replace me had backfired spectacularly, the greater victory was in building something that expressed my values and vision. A company where technical excellence and human experience were equally prioritized, where diverse perspectives were valued rather than marginalized. Another text arrived, this one from Linda. Rumor mill in overdrive here. Meridian chose Prism? Richard locked in his office for past hour. I hadn't wished for Richard's distress, but I couldn't help a small smile at the image. Actions had consequences, and his decision to dismiss my leadership approach had led directly to this moment. As I rejoined the team celebration, I reflected on the strange, winding path that had brought me here. 6 months ago, being fired had seemed like the worst professional setback imaginable. Now it appeared to be the catalyst for the most significant advancement of my career. The lessons weren't lost on me, that sometimes rejection redirects us to where we truly belong, that staying true to our values attracts others who share them, and that success built on authentic principles is the most sustainable kind. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, scaling Prism to handle 2 major clients simultaneously, recruiting additional talent, maintaining our cultural values through rapid growth. But tonight was for celebrating how far we'd come and acknowledging the sweet irony that the very qualities Vertex had rejected were precisely what had won us the clients they coveted most. As Marcus raised a toast to the future of Prism Technologies, I silently added my own, to unexpected journeys and the strength to follow them wherever they might lead. 3 months after securing the Meridian Global contract, Prism Technologies had transformed from a promising startup into a recognized innovator in the technology implementation space. Our team had grown from the original 12 to 38, occupying 2 full floors of our converted warehouse office space. The rapid expansion brought challenges, maintaining our culture, ensuring consistent quality, and balancing growth with stability, but the energy remained electric. I stood in our newly constructed conference room, preparing for a quarterly business review with Parker Industries. The implementation was progressing well, with user adoption rates exceeding even our optimistic projections. William Chen had become not just a client, but an advocate, recommending Prism to his industry peers with enthusiasm that money couldn't buy. "Everything ready for the Parker review?" Nadia asked, entering with a tablet displaying our latest metrics. "Almost," I replied, adjusting the presentation on the large screen. "I want to emphasize the user satisfaction scores from the first module rollout. They validate our entire approach." Nadia nodded in agreement. 92%. Positive feedback is practically unheard of for enterprise software implementation. Even Marcus was surprised, and he designed the interface. "Speaking of Marcus," I said, "where is he? He should be here for the final review." "HR orientation with the new hires," Nadia reminded me, "including those 2 developers from Vertex. He'll be here in 15. The mention of our newest team members brought a small smile. Over the past months, 7 former Vertex employees had joined Prism, each bringing valuable skills and experience. It wasn't active poaching. We had a strict policy against directly recruiting from competitors. But as word spread about Prism's culture and approach, applications arrived with increasing frequency. Linda, my former HR colleague at Vertex, had recently accepted our offer to become Prism's Director of Talent and Culture. Her insider knowledge of Vertex's operations had provided valuable context, though we were careful to respect confidentiality and intellectual property boundaries. "How's Linda settling in?" I asked, making a final adjustment to our presentation slides. "Like she's been here from the beginning," Nadia replied. "She's already implementing improvements to our onboarding process." The new hires seemed genuinely surprised by how different our culture is. "Different how?" "Transparent," Nadia said simply. One of the developers mentioned he never knew the strategic objectives behind his projects at Vertex, just received technical specifications and deadlines. This didn't surprise me. Richard's management style had always emphasized hierarchy and compartmentalization, with information strictly controlled based on seniority and position. At Prism, we deliberately created the opposite, an open environment where everyone understood how their work connected to client objectives and company vision. Marcus arrived, apologizing for his delay. The orientation ran long, lots of questions about our methodology and culture. "Good questions, I hope?" I asked. "Excellent ones," he confirmed. "These people are hungry for a different way of working." One of the senior developers, Alicia, I think, Actually said she'd taken a pay cut to join us because she was so tired of being ignored in meetings at her previous company. We spent the next 30 minutes finalizing our presentation for Parker Industries, highlighting not just technical accomplishments, but also the human impact of the implementation, productivity improvements, user satisfaction, and reduced training time. This balanced approach had become Prism's signature, the embodiment of our belief that technology should serve people, not the other way around. As we wrapped up our review, my assistant knocked on the conference room door. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's an urgent call from James Wilson at Meridian Global. He says it's important." I excused myself, taking the call in my office. "Mr. Wilson, good morning. What can I do for you?" "Ms. Parker," Wilson's voice held an unusual tension. "I apologize for the short notice, but I need to request your presence at Meridian headquarters this afternoon. A situation has developed that requires your immediate attention." My mind raced through possibilities: implementation problems, budget concerns, scope issues. But Wilson's tone suggested something more complex. "Of course," I replied. "Can you give me any details to prepare for?" A brief pause. "It involves Vertex Technologies. They've submitted an unsolicited proposal to our board, attempting to undercut our agreement with Prism. I've rejected it, but Richard Barnes has requested a meeting with me and the executive committee. He's bringing their full leadership team." The aggressive move was surprising even for Richard. Attempting to displace an already signed contract was a high-risk strategy that could damage Vertex's reputation if handled poorly. "I see," I said carefully. "And you'd like me to attend this meeting?" "Not just attend," Wilson clarified. "I want you there as Meridian's implementation partner, prepared to defend your approach directly against their proposals. It's unusual, I know, but I believe transparency is the best response to these tactics." I agreed immediately, rescheduling my afternoon commitments and asking Marcus to handle the Parker review in my absence. Within an hour, I was in a car headed to Meridian's downtown headquarters, reviewing our implementation plan and recent progress reports on my tablet. The situation was more confrontational than I'd anticipated, but it also represented an opportunity to directly address the differences between Prism's approach and Vertex's methodology. For months, we'd been winning clients based on our human-centered philosophy. Now I would have the chance to articulate that distinction with both approaches represented in the same room. Arriving at Meridian, I was escorted to a large conference room where James Wilson waited with several executive committee members. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a look of appreciation. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," he said. "Richard and his team should arrive momentarily. I want to be clear, Meridian has no intention of changing course. Our contract with Prism stands, but the board felt we should at least hear what Vertex has to offer, if only as due diligence." "I understand," I assured him. "Considering all options is responsible governance. Prism is confident in the value of our approach." One of the executive committee members, an older gentleman I recognized as the CFO, leaned forward. "Ms. Parker, given your history with Vertex, are you comfortable with this confrontational setting? We can approach this differently if you prefer." The question was considerate but unnecessary. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly comfortable defending Prism's methodology in any context. The differences between our approaches are substantive and worth articulating clearly." Wilson nodded approvingly. "That's what I expected you'd say." Before further discussion could occur, the conference room door opened to admit Richard Barnes, Greg Peterson, and 3 other Vertex executives I recognized from my time there. The moment Richard saw me, he faltered briefly, clearly not having expected my presence. "Ms. Parker?" he acknowledged stiffly, recovering his composure. "I wasn't aware this was a joint meeting." "Prism Technologies is Meridian's contracted implementation partner," Wilson stated matter-of-factly. "Since your proposal seeks to alter that arrangement, I felt it appropriate that they be represented." Richard's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he nodded. Of course. Transparency is always valuable. The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me, given Vertex's typically opaque approach to client relations, but I maintained a neutral expression as everyone took their seats around the conference table. Wilson opened the meeting directly. Gentlemen, Ms. Parker, let's be clear about today's purpose. Vertex has submitted an unsolicited proposal to replace Prism Technologies as Meridian's implementation partner for our enterprise system modernization. While our contract with Prism remains in force, the board has agreed to hear Vertex's proposal as a matter of due diligence. He turned to Richard. Mr. Barnes, please proceed with your presentation. Richard launched into a polished pitch, highlighting Vertex's size, established history, and extensive client list. The presentation was technically sound, but followed familiar patterns, emphasizing technical specifications and features while giving only cursory attention to user experience and organizational integration. Our proposed solution offers a 15% cost reduction from Prism's contracted price, Richard continued, directing his remarks primarily to Meridian's CFO. With the same technical functionality, but leveraging our greater scale and established processes. The emphasis on cost and technical parity was strategic, attempting to position the decision as a simple economic calculation rather than a more complex evaluation of approaches and outcomes. When Richard concluded, Wilson turned to me. Ms. Parker, would you like to respond? I stood thanking Wilson before addressing the room. The proposal we've just heard focuses primarily on technical specifications and cost. These are certainly important considerations, but they represent only part of the value equation in technology implementation. Moving to the presentation screen, I displayed our recent metrics from the Parker Industries project. These figures represent actual results from our current implementation at Parker Industries. 92% user satisfaction, 87% reduction in training time, and 24% productivity improvement within the first 3 months. I advanced to another slide showing Prism's integrated methodology. These outcomes aren't accidental. They result from an approach that integrates technical excellence with deep understanding of human workflows and organizational dynamics. We don't just build systems, we ensure they enhance how people work. Turning specifically to address Meridian's executive committee, I continued. The apparent cost savings in Vertex's proposal don't account for the hidden costs of poor adoption, extended training periods, and workflow disruption. When those factors are included, Prism's approach actually offers greater value and lower total cost of ownership. Richard attempted to interrupt, but Wilson raised a hand, allowing me to finish. Meridian selected Prism because our philosophy aligns with your belief that technology should enhance human capability rather than simply automate functions, I concluded. That alignment remains the foundation of our partnership, and it's something that can't be reduced to a line item in a cost comparison. When I finished, Wilson thanked me and opened the floor for questions from Meridian's executive committee. The discussion that followed was substantive and detailed, with both Richard and I fielding inquiries about our respective approaches. Throughout the exchange, I noticed a shift in the room's dynamics. While Richard continued emphasizing Vertex's size and established processes, Meridian's executives increasingly directed their more thoughtful questions to me, particularly regarding user experience and organizational integration. After nearly 2 hours of discussion, Wilson called the meeting to a close. Thank you all for your time and insights. The executive committee will review both presentations and provide our response within the week. As the meeting disbanded, Richard approached me, his expression carefully controlled. Impressive presentation, Emma. You've built something noteworthy with Prism. The unexpected compliment took me by surprise. Thank you, Richard. That means a lot coming from you. His next words were quieter, intended only for me. I may have misjudged certain aspects of your leadership approach. The market appears to value your perspective more than I anticipated. Before I could respond, he rejoined his team, leaving me to wonder whether his words represented genuine reflection or simply strategic repositioning. Wilson approached as the Vertex team departed. That went as well as could be expected. Your defense of Prism's approach was exactly what the committee needed to hear. Thank you for the opportunity, I replied. Though I have to admit, I didn't expect such a direct confrontation this early in our relationship. Wilson's expression turned thoughtful. Between us, Richard's move was prompted by pressure from Vertex's board. Losing both Parker and Meridian has raised questions about his leadership. This was a desperate play to recapture lost ground. The information provided context for Richard's uncharacteristic aggression and his surprising acknowledgement of my success. His position was potentially at risk, a development I hadn't anticipated and found myself having mixed feelings about. I don't expect the committee to seriously consider changing course, Wilson continued, but the comparison was actually valuable. It highlighted precisely why we selected Prism in the first place. Returning to the Prism office, I found the team anxiously awaiting news of the Meridian meeting. I recounted the confrontation, Richard's surprising comments, and Wilson's reassurance that our contract remained secure. So Richard's finally admitting he made a mistake in letting you go? Marcus asked, clearly enjoying the irony. Not exactly, I clarified. More acknowledging that the market values our approach, but he's under pressure from Vertex's board, which explains the aggressive move to try recapturing Meridian's business. Nadia shook her head. It's almost sad. They still don't get it. This isn't just about winning or losing specific clients. It's about fundamentally different philosophies of what technology implementation should be. Exactly, I agreed. And that's actually good news for Prism. We're not competing with Vertex on their terms. Bigger, more established, more traditional. We're changing the conversation entirely. The following week brought confirmation from Wilson that Meridian remained committed to Prism as their implementation partner. The executive committee had unanimously rejected Vertex's proposal, citing alignment with Prism's human-centered approach as a key factor in their decision. More surprising was the news that arrived a month later. Richard Barnes had resigned as CEO of Vertex Technologies, citing personal reasons in the carefully worded press release. Industry insiders suggested the board had forced the change following the loss of several key clients and mounting questions about the company's strategic direction. Greg Peterson was named interim CEO with a mandate to realign Vertex's approach with evolving market expectations, language that suggested the board recognized the shifting landscape that Prism had helped create. The news prompted mixed reactions at Prism. Some team members celebrated, viewing it as vindication of our philosophy. Others, including me, felt a more complex response. Recognition that Richard's fall represented both justice and tragedy. The consequences of clinging to outdated beliefs about leadership and value. What do you think will happen at Vertex now? Linda asked during our weekly leadership team lunch. Greg has always been more flexible than Richard in his thinking. They'll adapt, I predicted. Not by copying Prism exactly, but by incorporating more human-centered elements into their approach. The market is speaking too clearly to ignore. As if confirming my assessment, an email arrived from Greg the following day, requesting a meeting to discuss potential areas of complementary expertise between our organizations. The outreach represented a dramatic shift from his coffee shop attempt to pressure Prism into stepping aside with Meridian. After consulting with our leadership team, I agreed to the meeting, suggesting neutral territory at a downtown restaurant, rather than either company's offices. The symbolic equality of the location wasn't lost on Greg when he accepted. 2 days later, I arrived at the restaurant to find Greg already seated, looking both professional and noticeably less tense than during our previous encounter. He stood as I approached, extending his hand. Emma, thank you for agreeing to meet. I appreciate your willingness to have this conversation. Of course, I replied, taking the seat across from him. Your message suggested you have something specific in mind. After ordering drinks, Greg got directly to the point. Vertex is undergoing significant changes. The board has recognized that our traditional approach needs evolution to remain competitive in today's market. I noticed the press release mentioned realignment with market expectations, I observed neutrally. Greg nodded. That's diplomatic. Language for, we need to incorporate more of what Prism is doing so successfully. He offered a self-deprecating smile. I won't pretend this is comfortable for me, Emma. But I'm practical enough to recognize when a different approach is proving more effective. His candor was unexpected and appreciated. What exactly are you proposing, Greg? Not a merger or acquisition, he clarified quickly. Both our organizations are too distinct in culture and philosophy for that to work. But I am suggesting a limited collaborative framework, specific projects where Vertex's technical depth and established processes could complement Prism's human-centered methodology. The proposal was intriguing. While Prism had rapidly developed strong capabilities, there were areas where Vertex's decades of experience and larger resource pool could potentially add value. I'm open to exploring the concept, I said carefully. Though any collaboration would need to maintain the distinct identity and approach that defines Prism. Absolutely, Greg agreed. I'm not suggesting either organization compromise its core values. Rather, I'm proposing we identify specific client situations where a collaborative approach might deliver better results than either company could achieve alone. We spent the next hour discussing potential frameworks for limited collaboration, establishing clear boundaries and principles that would govern any joint efforts. The conversation was surprisingly productive, with Greg demonstrating a level of flexibility and pragmatism I hadn't always seen during my time at Vertex. As our meeting concluded, Greg asked a question that caught me off guard. Do you ever regret how things unfolded, Emma? The way you left Vertex? I considered the question carefully. I regret that it became necessary. I would have preferred to evolve Vertex's approach from within, to help the organization adapt rather than having to build something new. But I don't regret where it led. Prism represents exactly the philosophy and values I believe in. Greg nodded thoughtfully. For what it's worth, I regret not advocating more strongly against your dismissal. Richard was convinced that a more traditional leadership presence was necessary for our growth strategy, but the market has decisively proven otherwise. The market and the people within it, I added. Technology exists to serve human needs, not the other way around. That's always been the core of my philosophy. A philosophy that's reshaping our industry, Greg acknowledged. Whether through Prism's direct influence or through forcing companies like Vertex to adapt. We parted with a tentative agreement to continue discussions about potential collaboration, a development I would never have predicted 6 months earlier. The conversation left me reflective about how dramatically circumstances had changed. From being fired for my supposedly insufficient leadership presence to being courted as a potential partner by the same organization. Back at Prism, I shared the substance of my meeting with our leadership team, generating spirited debate about the potential benefits and risks of limited collaboration with Vertex. It feels like validation, Marcus observed. They're essentially admitting that our approach has merit. But does it dilute what makes us distinctive? Nadia countered. Our identity is built on being different from traditional implementers like Vertex. Linda, with her unique perspective having worked at both organizations, offered a balanced view. Collaboration doesn't have to mean compromise. It's possible to maintain distinct approaches while leveraging complementary strengths for specific client needs. The discussion continued over subsequent days, eventually reaching a consensus that we would explore limited collaborative opportunities while maintaining Prism's distinctive identity and methodology. Any joint efforts would need to align with our values and enhance our ability to deliver human-centered implementations. As these discussions evolved, A more immediate development demanded attention. Sarah Parker contacted me with news that would significantly accelerate Prism's growth trajectory. "Emma," she began when I answered her call, "how would you feel about expanding Prism's relationship with Parker Industries beyond the current implementation project?" "I'd be very interested," I replied cautiously. "What specifically do you have in mind?" "We've been so impressed with your approach that we're considering making Prism our exclusive technology implementation partner across all divisions," she explained. "This would involve multiple projects over the next 3 years, with a total contract value approaching $40 million. The figure momentarily took my breath away. A commitment of that magnitude would transform Prism from a successful startup into an established industry player practically overnight. "That's a substantial vote of confidence," I said when I found my voice. "May I ask what prompted such an expansive proposal?" "Results," Sarah replied simply. "The metrics from our current implementation speak for themselves. Higher adoption, faster training, greater productivity improvement. But it's more than numbers. The feedback from our people has been overwhelmingly positive. They feel the technology is actually helping them work better, rather than just adding complexity to their jobs. The validation of our approach couldn't have been more direct. We would be honored to expand our partnership with Parker Industries. When would you like to discuss specifics?" "I'm holding time next week for a preliminary discussion," Sarah said. "But there's something else you should know. We've been talking with Meridian Global about creating a joint technology innovation fund to invest in companies developing human-centered enterprise solutions. Your name came up repeatedly in those conversations. The implication was clear. Prism had so impressed both Parker and Meridian that they were considering not just expanded contracts, but strategic investment. The potential acceleration of our growth was both exhilarating and slightly terrifying." "That's unexpected," I managed. Sarah laughed softly. "Not from our perspective. You've proven that prioritizing the human experience in technology implementation creates measurable business value. That's worth investing in." After concluding the call, I sat at my desk for several minutes, processing the implications of this development. In less than a year, Prism had evolved from a concept born of professional rejection to a company potentially receiving strategic investment from 2 industry leaders. The trajectory exceeded even my most optimistic projections. I thought back to that moment in Vertex's conference room, hearing Richard and Greg explain that leadership at their level required a certain type of presence, that clients like Meridian and Parker expected strong, commanding leadership that I presumably couldn't provide. Now, those same clients were not only choosing Prism over Vertex, but considering strategic investment in our approach. The irony wasn't lost on me, though I took no pleasure in Richard's downfall. His failure represented the natural consequence of clinging to outdated notions of leadership and value in a rapidly evolving industry. More satisfying was the validation of my core belief that technology implementation should prioritize human experience, that successful systems enhance, rather than complicate how people work. This philosophy, once dismissed as insufficient for commanding leadership, had proven to be precisely what sophisticated clients valued most. As I prepared to share the news with our team, I reflected on the strange, winding path that had led to this moment. Being fired had felt like professional catastrophe at the time, but it had actually been the catalyst for creating something far more aligned with my values and vision than my role at Vertex had ever been. The lesson seemed clear. Sometimes, rejection redirects us exactly where we need to go, pushing us to create opportunities that wouldn't otherwise have existed. In firing me for being just a woman with the wrong leadership style, Richard had inadvertently launched me toward creating the very company that would challenge and ultimately transform the industry's understanding of what leadership in technology implementation should look like. 2 years after founding Prism Technologies, I stood in the gleaming reception area of our new headquarters. a renovated 6-story building in the heart of the downtown business district. The space reflected our philosophy: open, collaborative areas balanced with quiet zones for focused work, all designed with human experience as the priority. Natural light poured through large windows, plants added life to every floor, and the absence of hierarchical corner offices sent a clear message about our organizational values. "What do you think?" asked Marcus, joining me as I surveyed the bustling reception area where our company logo, a prism refracting light into a spectrum of colors, adorned the wall in brushed metal. "It's perfect," I replied, feeling a surge of pride. Exactly what I envisioned but couldn't quite articulate. "That's what good designers are for," he said with a grin. Turning vague concepts like open but not chaotic and professional but not sterile into actual spaces. We wandered through the main floor, where teams collaborated in glass-walled meeting rooms or gathered around digital whiteboards. The energy was palpable, focused but not frantic, collaborative without being chaotic. This balance had become Prism's hallmark, both in our work environment and in the technology solutions we implemented for clients. "The Parker team is ready in Conference Room A," my assistant informed me as we reached my office. A glass-walled space no larger than anyone else's, positioned not in a corner but centrally located for easy access by everyone. "They've brought the implementation metrics for the final phase rollout." The mention of Parker Industries brought a smile. Our relationship had deepened significantly over the past year, expanding beyond the initial implementation to encompass multiple divisions and technological initiatives. Sarah Parker had become not just a client, but an advocate, recommending Prism to her industry peers with an enthusiasm that had accelerated our growth beyond all projections. "Perfect timing," I said, gathering my tablet. "Marcus, are you joining us for this one?" He nodded. "Wouldn't miss it. The UI satisfaction scores should be particularly interesting." Conference Room A was already filled with a mix of Parker Industries executives and Prism's implementation team. William Chen, still our primary contact, stood as we entered. "Emma? Marcus. Just the people we were hoping to see," he greeted warmly. "We've got some exciting results to share." The meeting that followed exceeded even our optimistic expectations. The final phase metrics showed user adoption rates approaching 98%, training time reduced by 60% compared to industry standards, and, most significantly, a 34% improvement in workflow efficiency across Parker's operations. These numbers validate everything we believed about human-centered implementation, William concluded his presentation. The technology isn't just functioning technically, it's actually enhancing how our people work. Sarah Parker, who had joined midway through the meeting, leaned forward. Which brings us to the next conversation. As you know, we've been discussing with Meridian Global about creating a joint innovation fund for human-centered enterprise technology. After reviewing these results, we're ready to formalize that initiative. My pulse quickened. We'd been in preliminary discussions about this potential fund for months, but concrete details had remained elusive. The fund will initially control $75 million in investment capital, Sarah continued, focused specifically on companies developing technologies that prioritize human experience and workflow enhancement. We'd like Prism to serve as the primary technical advisor, helping evaluate potential investments and providing implementation expertise where appropriate. The opportunity was massive, not just the consulting fees for advisory services, but the chance to help shape the future direction of enterprise technology. It represented validation of our philosophy at an industry level, expanding our influence beyond individual client implementations to the very ecosystem of technology development. We would be honored to serve in that capacity, I replied, maintaining professional composure despite my excitement. Our team has developed significant expertise in identifying technologies that truly enhance human capabilities, rather than simply adding digital layers to existing processes. Exactly why we want Prism involved, Sarah confirmed. The fund's official announcement is scheduled for next month at the National Technology Summit in Chicago. We'd like you to join us on stage for the formal launch. The National Technology Summit was the industry's premier annual event, drawing executives and thought leaders from across the country. A stage appearance alongside leaders from Parker Industries and Meridian Global would position Prism as a central player in enterprise technology, not just an implementation vendor, but an architect of the industry's future direction. After the Parker team departed, Marcus turned to me with undisguised enthusiasm. "This is massive, Emma. The fund, the summit announcement, it positions us exactly where we've been aiming. As thought leaders rather than just service providers," I agreed. "It's the difference between implementing others' visions and helping shape what those visions look like in the first place." The significance of this evolution wasn't lost on me. 2 years ago, Richard Barnes had dismissed my leadership approach as insufficient for commanding presence with major clients. Now, those same clients were not only choosing Prism, but elevating us to advisory status, validating our human-centered philosophy as the future of enterprise technology. Back in my office, I found a notification that our quarterly industry positioning report had been released. The document, produced by a respected analyst firm, evaluated technology implementation, providers based on capability, market presence, and client satisfaction. Opening the report, I scrolled to the familiar quadrant chart that positioned companies along 2 axes: completeness of vision and ability to execute. For the first time, Prism Technologies appeared in the coveted Leaders quadrant, positioning us alongside established players like Accenture and Deloitte, and notably, ahead of Vertex Technologies, which had slipped to the Challengers quadrant, indicating strong execution but limited vision. Linda appeared in my doorway as I reviewed the report. "Have you seen the new rankings? The team is already celebrating." "Just looking at them now," I confirmed. "It's remarkable progress in such a short time." "Not remarkable, earned," Linda corrected, entering and taking a seat. "This positioning reflects exactly what our clients have been saying for months, that Prism's approach represents the future of technology implementation." She hesitated briefly before continuing. "There's something else you should know. I received a call from a board member at Vertex this morning. They're making another leadership change." This caught my attention. "Greg is stepping down?" "Not exactly," Linda clarified. "The board is bringing in a CEO from outside, someone with experience in human-centered design. Greg will remain as COO, focusing on operations while the new leadership reshapes their market approach." The news wasn't entirely surprising. Under Greg's interim leadership, Vertex had begun incorporating elements of human-centered methodology, but the transformation had been incremental rather than fundamental. Their continued slide in market position suggested the board had grown impatient with the pace of change. "Do you know who they're bringing in?" I asked. Linda nodded. "Catherine Reynolds from Insight Design Group. She's built her career on human-centered approaches to technology, though primarily in consumer-facing applications rather than enterprise systems." The name was familiar. Reynolds had a strong reputation for transforming traditional technology companies through design thinking and user-centered methodologies. Her appointment signaled that Vertex's board was finally recognizing the market shift that Prism had helped accelerate. "Interesting choice," I observed. "She'll face significant cultural resistance within Vertex, but if anyone can reshape their approach, she might be the one." "That's not all," Linda added. "The board member mentioned they're considering proposing a more formal relationship with Prism, possibly an acquisition offer. This was unexpected. Vertex wants to acquire Prism? That seems contradictory, given our history." "It's precisely because of that history," Linda explained. "They recognize that Prism represents the future they need to embrace, and they're weighing whether building that capability internally or acquiring it through Prism would be more effective." The irony wasn't lost on me. The company that had fired me for my leadership approach now potentially wanting to acquire the company I'd built on exactly that approach. It represented validation in the most explicit possible form, yet also raised complex questions about Prism's independence and cultural integrity. "We shouldn't give this too much weight yet," I cautioned. "Exploratory conversations at the board level don't necessarily translate to formal offers." "True," Linda conceded. "But it does confirm something important. Vertex now sees your approach as not just valid, but essential to their future. That's quite a reversal from 2 years ago." The observation stayed with me throughout the day as I managed a series of client calls and internal meetings. By late afternoon, I needed perspective and stepped out onto the rooftop garden we'd created as a quiet space for reflection or small gatherings. The panoramic view of the city skyline provided a visual reminder of how far we'd come, from a small team in a converted warehouse to a recognized industry leader with a prime downtown location. My contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of Nadia, who had been traveling for client meetings and had just returned. "Thought I might find you up here," she said, joining me at the railing. "Heard about the Parker meeting and the innovation fund. Congratulations." "It's a team achievement," I replied. "Your work on the Parker implementation has been central to those results." She acknowledged this with a nod. "Also heard about Vertex's potential interest. How do you feel about that?" I considered the question carefully. Conflicted. On one level, it represents complete validation of everything we've built. On another, I question whether Prism's approach could survive within Vertex's organizational structure, even with new leadership. "The classic innovator's dilemma," Nadia observed. "Being absorbed by the very establishment you set out to challenge." The phrase captured the tension perfectly. Prism had been founded specifically to create an alternative to traditional implementation, approaches like Vertex's. Being acquired might accelerate the spread of our philosophy, but could also dilute its distinctive character. "We don't need to make any decisions yet," I said finally. "This is still speculative, and we have significant momentum as an independent entity." Nadia smiled. "Like the Innovation Fund and the National Technology Summit appearance. Speaking of which, what are you planning to wear for your big stage moment? It's not every day you get to stand alongside CEOs of companies that size." The question caught me off guard. I hadn't given any thought to the presentation aspects of the summit announcement. "I haven't considered it yet. Something professional, obviously." "Professional, but distinctive," Nadia suggested. "This is a moment to visually reinforce what makes Prism different, authoritative without conforming to traditional executive imagery." Her comment reminded me of Richard's criticism that had precipitated my dismissal from Vertex, that I lacked the executive presence needed for major client relationships. The summit would place me on stage with precisely the type of clients Richard had believed I couldn't effectively engage, providing an opportunity to visibly refute his assumptions. "You're right," I agreed. "This appearance should represent Prism's values visually as well as verbally." Over the following weeks, preparations for the summit consumed significant attention alongside our ongoing client work. The Innovation Fund announcement had grown in scope, with additional financial institutions joining Parker Industries and Meridian Global as founding investors, increasing the initial capital to $100 million. My presentation for the announcement underwent multiple revisions, evolving from a simple acknowledgement of Prism's advisory role to a more substantive articulation of how human-centered technology was reshaping enterprise systems. The summit organizers had expanded our segment, recognizing the significance of the fund as an industry-shifting development. A week before the summit, I received an unexpected message from Catherine Reynolds, Vertex's newly appointed CEO, requesting a brief meeting during the event. Her note was professional but warm, expressing interest in exploring potential synergies between our organization's approaches. I agreed to the meeting, curious about her vision for Vertex's transformation and what role she imagined Prism might play in it. The morning of the summit arrived with perfect Chicago weather, clear skies and moderate temperatures as my team and I entered the massive convention center where the event was being held. The venue hummed with activity, thousands of industry professionals gathering for the 3-day conference that would feature presentations from technology leaders across various sectors. Our schedule was packed. The Innovation Fund announcement on the main stage that afternoon, followed by a private reception for fund partners and selected industry figures. The following day included a panel discussion on human-centered enterprise systems where I would represent Prism alongside executives from several major corporations. "The main hall is already filling up," Marcus reported, returning from a brief reconnaissance mission. "They've added overflow viewing areas with video feeds. Your session is generating significant buzz." This wasn't surprising. The combination of major financial institutions creating a specialized investment fund represented noteworthy industry news. Still, the scale of interest validated the significance of human-centered approaches moving from niche philosophy to mainstream consideration. As we oriented ourselves, I spotted a familiar figure across the bustling registration area, Richard Barnes, engaged in conversation with several executives. He hadn't attended the summit when I was at Vertex, considering it more flash than substance compared to more technically focused conferences. His presence now suggested a recognition of the event's growing industry influence. For a moment, I considered avoiding the interaction, but decided against it. Prism's success spoke for itself. There was no need to evade potentially awkward encounters. As if sensing my gaze, Richard looked up, our eyes meeting across the crowded space. After a brief hesitation, he excused himself from his group and approached, his expression carefully neutral. "Emma," he greeted, extending his hand. "Congratulations on Prism's success. The industry positioning report was quite favorable." "Thank you, Richard," I replied, accepting the handshake. "I understand Vertex is undergoing interesting changes as well. Catherine Reynolds has an impressive background." He nodded. The board felt fresh perspective was needed. The market has evolved more rapidly than we anticipated. The understated acknowledgement was as close to admission of strategic error as Richard was likely to offer. Rather than press the point, I shifted to neutral territory. "Are you speaking at the summit this year?" "Participating in a panel on enterprise integration tomorrow," he confirmed. "I noticed you're featured in the Innovation Fund announcement this afternoon. Quite a significant development." "We're honored to be involved," I said simply. "The fund represents an important shift in how enterprise technology is evaluated and deployed." An awkward silence followed, both of us aware of the unspoken context that Prism's central role in this industry evolution represented direct refutation of the limitations Richard had placed on my leadership potential. "Well, I should rejoin my colleagues," he said finally. "Perhaps we'll cross paths again during the event." "I expect we will," I agreed. "Best of luck with your panel tomorrow." As Richard departed, Marcus rejoined me, having observed the exchange from a distance. "That looked uncomfortable. What did he want?" "Just a professional acknowledgement," I replied, though it felt like he was taking measure of how much has changed since we last worked together. "The answer being everything," Marcus observed. "You're announcing a $100 million innovation fund today, while Vertex is trying to reinvent itself to catch up with the approach you pioneered." The observation was accurate, but not entirely satisfying. While Prism's success represented professional vindication, I took no pleasure in Vertex's struggles. The company was filled with talented people, many of whom I had worked alongside for years. Their difficulty adapting to market evolution reflected leadership failures rather than individual shortcomings. "They'll adapt," I said. "Catherine Reynolds has the right background to guide that transformation, if the organization is willing to embrace change." The hours before our main stage appearance passed quickly. filled with final preparation meetings and brief conversations with industry colleagues. The anticipation built steadily, with industry publications and social media buzzing about the rumored fund announcement. 30 minutes before our scheduled appearance, I met with Sarah Parker and James Wilson in a private preparation room adjacent to the main stage. They were accompanied by executives from the additional financial institutions that had joined the fund, creating an impressive array of industry leadership. "Everything set for the announcement?" Sarah asked, adjusting her presentation notes. "All prepared," I confirmed, though I understand the format has expanded somewhat from our initial discussions. James Wilson nodded. The summit organizers recognized the significance of the fund and allocated additional time. "We'll have 45 minutes rather than the original 30, allowing for more substantive explanation of the investment thesis. And placing Prism's advisory role in proper context," Sarah added. "Your perspective on evaluating technologies for human enhancement rather than mere automation will be central to the fund's approach." As we finalized coordination details, a production assistant arrived to guide us backstage. The sounds of the packed main hall filtered through. Thousands of industry professionals gathered to hear about technological developments that would shape the coming year. Standing in the wings, I could see the massive stage with its dramatic lighting and giant presentation screens. The current speaker was concluding their session on cybersecurity trends, receiving enthusiastic applause as they wrapped up their key points. Sarah touched my arm lightly. "Nervous?" "Focused," I corrected with a smile. "This is an important moment for human-centered technology. The opportunity to articulate that vision to this audience is significant." She nodded approvingly. "That's exactly why we wanted Prism involved. You see beyond the technology to its human impact, how it enhances capability rather than simply automating functions." The stage manager approached, indicating it was time to take our positions. As we moved toward the stage entrance, I caught sight of familiar faces in the front rows: Marcus, Nadia, and other Prism team members who had come to support this milestone. And there, several rows back, Greg Peterson and Catherine Reynolds from Vertex, watching with evident interest. The moment crystallized something important. Prism's success wasn't just about proving Richard wrong or validating my leadership approach. It represented a genuine shift in how enterprise technology was conceived and implemented, a movement toward systems designed to enhance human capability rather than simply replace it. As we were introduced and walked onto the stage to enthusiastic applause, I felt a profound sense of alignment between my personal values, Prism's organizational mission, and the industry's evolving understanding of technology's proper role. The journey from being fired to this moment of industry leadership had been challenging but clarifying, revealing not just what I was capable of, but what truly mattered in the work I chose to pursue. Sarah stepped to the podium first, beginning the formal announcement of the Innovation Fund and its founding investors. As she spoke, I glanced again at the Vertex executives in the audience, noting Catherine Reynolds' attentive expression and Greg's thoughtful nod at key points. They represented Vertex's future, an attempt to evolve beyond the limitations that had defined the organization under Richard's leadership. Whether through internal transformation or potential acquisition of companies like Prism, they were acknowledging that human-centered implementation wasn't just a market niche, but the direction the entire industry was moving. When my turn came to address the audience, I moved to the podium with quiet confidence. The faces before me represented the technology implementation ecosystem: vendors, clients, analysts, and media. My words would help shape how they understood the significance of this moment, not just for Prism or the Innovation Fund, but for the industry's evolution toward technologies that truly served human needs. "Thank you, Sarah," I began, surveying the attentive crowd. The fund being announced today represents more than just capital investment in technology companies. It signifies recognition that the most valuable enterprise systems aren't those with the most features or the latest technical capabilities. but those that most effectively enhance how people work. As I continued outlining Prism's approach to evaluating technologies for human enhancement rather than mere automation, I noticed Richard Barnes enter quietly from a side door, standing at the back of the hall to observe the presentation. His presence completed the circle in some way. The executive who had once dismissed my leadership approach, now witnessing its validation on the industry's largest stage. The symbolism wasn't lost on me, but neither was it the point. This moment wasn't about personal vindication, but about advancing a vision of technology that placed human experience at its center. That vision had driven me since before Prism existed, had sustained me through professional rejection, and now guided an organization that was helping reshape how enterprise technology was conceived and implemented. As my portion of the presentation concluded to enthusiastic applause, I stepped back from the podium with a sense of rightness. Not just about this moment, but about the path that had led here. Being fired had been painful but necessary, redirecting me toward creating something that more perfectly expressed my values and vision than my role at Vertex ever could have. The Innovation Fund announcement concluded with James Wilson outlining the investment criteria and initial focus areas. As we left the stage to continued applause, I realized that this represented not an endpoint, but a milestone in Prism's ongoing journey, one that had already exceeded all expectations and now opened new possibilities for influence and impact. In the reception area outside the main hall, a crowd quickly gathered around our group, industry colleagues eager to discuss the fund's implications and Prism's advisory role. As I navigated these conversations, I caught sight of Catherine Reynolds, making her way deliberately toward me through the crowded space. "Ms. Parker," she greeted, extending her hand. Catherine Reynolds. That was an impressive presentation. The fund represents a significant evolution in how enterprise technology is evaluated and deployed. "Thank you, Ms. Reynolds," I replied, accepting her handshake. "I understand we're scheduled to meet tomorrow. I'm looking forward to hearing your vision for Vertex's evolution." She smiled, a quick, intelligent expression. "And I'm eager to discuss how our organizations might collaborate more effectively. The industry is changing rapidly, and those changes create opportunities for new kinds of partnerships." As Catherine moved on to greet James Wilson, I found myself considering the possibilities her comment suggested. Vertex, under new leadership, might become not a competitor, but a potential ally in advancing human-centered technology implementation. The summit reception continued around me, a buzzing concentration of industry leadership and technological innovation. In this environment, surrounded by colleagues and competitors, clients and partners, I felt a sense of belonging that transcended individual organizations or roles, connection to a movement reshaping how technology served human needs in complex enterprise environments. This was the true validation of the journey that had begun with rejection and redirection, not just personal success or organizational growth, but participation in an industry evolution that aligned perfectly with my deepest values and professional vision. 5 years after founding Prism, I stood in the elevator of Vertex's headquarters, a strange sense of déjà vu washing over me. The last time I'd ridden this elevator, I'd been carrying a box of personal belongings, fighting back tears. After my dismissal, today I was here as CEO of their largest client. Meridian Global had acquired Parker Industries last year, consolidating their business under my direction. Richard waited in the boardroom, standing as I entered. His smile seemed forced, eyes revealing recognition of the moment's perfect symmetry. "Emma," he greeted, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming personally." "The contract renewal deserved CEO attention," I replied, my voice steady. Catherine Reynolds joined us, the woman who'd replaced Richard when Vertex's board finally acknowledged their cultural problems. As we discussed terms, I felt no bitterness, only appreciation for the journey. Being fired had freed me to build something authentic, something better. When Richard excused himself mid-meeting, Catherine leaned forward. "You know, Firing you was his biggest professional mistake. I smiled. Perhaps, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Up next, you've got 2 more stand out. Stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.